Let me take you back to the beginning. Not the painful part yet, just to a beginning worth remembering. The one I still keep folded in the back pocket of my memory, like a map I no longer need, but can't quite throw away. I enrolled in Eastbrook University during fall semester, my freshman year. I moved into room 214, Lancaster Hall. There were 2 extra-long twin beds, a shared desk the size of a cafeteria tray, and Henry Marsh already sprawled on the left bed, with his shoes on the bedspread like he owned the whole floor. That was Henry. He walked into every room like he'd already read the reviews and given it 5 stars. He was loud and completely unbothered by the opinions of people he didn't know yet. He looked at me when I wheeled in my suitcase, pointed at the right bed, and said, "That one's yours. Don't touch my stuff. We're going to be best friends." He was right on both counts. By October, we were legends in the most low-grade, campus security knows our names kind of way. We put a motion-activated air horn inside the resident advisor's filing cabinet. We rerouted the dining hall's announcement system to play the Jurassic Park theme every Tuesday at noon. We once convinced an entire sociology class that the professor had moved the midterm to Saturday. She didn't. We attended every Friday night party, slept through every 8 a.m. lecture, and somehow miraculously maintained GPAs just respectable enough to avoid expulsion. Those were the years where everything felt like a game with no real consequences, where you could be whomever you were still figuring out how to be, and I had my eye on the prize. My breath caught when I saw her. It was a Sigma Tau party in late October, the kind of party where half the people don't know the host, and the other half pretend they do. Someone's backyard strung with orange lights, a cooler full of bad decisions, and a playlist that kept sliding between decades. I was standing near the drink table with Henry when I noticed this goddess. She was on the far side of the yard talking to a small circle of girls, all of them laughing at something she'd said. She wore a dark green dress, her hair was loose around her shoulders, and there was something about her, not just that she was beautiful, though she was, but something about the way she laughed, like it was involuntary, like joy came out of her before she could think to hold it back. "Who is that?" I asked Henry. "Letitia Houston. She's a junior pre-law. Way out of your league," he said. "Introduction," I said. "Absolutely not. But he introduced me anyway because that's what Henry did. He stood between you and your fear and said, 'Here, I'll hold the door,' and then he stepped back and watched." I walked up to her and said, "I hear you're pre-law. I'm thinking about law school too. Can I ask you a terrible question?" She turned and looked at me with those eyes, dark brown and amused. "How terrible? Is it possible to actually enjoy law school, or do you just endure it?" She laughed. That same laugh I'd seen from across the yard. Up close it was even better. "That's not terrible. That's actually the only honest question I've heard tonight." We talked for 2 hours, about law, ambition, and whether either of us actually knew what we wanted from life, or whether we were just picking a direction and hoping for the coast to show up. She was sharp, funny in a way that came from seeing things clearly. She didn't perform for me, she just talked and I listened, and something between us found its footing on that cold October night and refused to let go. I was 20, she was 22, and life had other plans for both of us before it would let us find each other again. After graduation, life scattered us the way it does in different directions, at speed, without ceremony. Henry took a job in Austin. I moved to Denver for an entry-level position at a mid-size marketing consultancy. Letitia's number was somewhere on an old phone I dropped in a campus toilet sophomore year and never fully mourned. I thought about her sometimes. The way you think about a song you can't quite remember the name of. Something about dark green dresses and October light. 3 years passed. I got better at my job, a bigger apartment, and I stopped eating cereal for dinner most nights. I was building a life brick by brick. It was quiet in the way a life can be quiet when it's missing the person who should be in it. Then on a Tuesday in March, I remember, because I'd just come back from a terrible client meeting and I was eating leftover pasta at my desk, my LinkedIn notification lit up. "Letitia Houston has viewed your profile." I sat very still for exactly 4 seconds. Then I clicked over to her profile so fast I knocked my fork off the desk. She was in Denver, had been for 8 months working as an associate at a litigation firm downtown. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I did something I'd never done before or since on a professional networking platform. I sent a message that had absolutely nothing professional about it. "Letitia Houston, it's Jude from that October party at Sigma Tau. You told me law school was survivable with the right playlist and enough conviction. Did you make it? And more importantly, are you free for coffee?" She replied in 11 minutes. "I made it. And yes. Tomorrow at 10? We talked for 4 hours over coffee that stretched into lunch. She remembered the party. She remembered what I'd been wearing, dark jeans and a blue flannel. She said, which I couldn't confirm, but didn't argue. She told me about her firm, her caseload, the particular exhaustion of litigating insurance disputes for 9 hours a day. I told her about the consultancy, about the clients who wanted miracles on budgets that could barely afford coincidences. By the time the restaurant wanted their table back, it was mid-afternoon and neither of us wanted to leave. She walked me to my car. We stood there on the sidewalk in the cold, and she looked at me and said, "I looked you up, not just on LinkedIn. I wanted to know what happened to the guy from the party." "What did you find?" "Someone who turned out exactly the way I thought he might." We were together by the following weekend, engaged 18 months later, and married on a September Saturday with Henry as my best man, his toast so funny and so mortifying that Letitia's grandmother laughed until she cried. I had everything. I want you to understand that before I tell you what came next. I had everything, and I knew it, and I was grateful for it every day, until I wasn't enough. The first 2 years of our marriage were good. We were both busy, her caseload had doubled, and I'd moved from the consultancy to my own small agency, taking on 3 major clients who kept me in the office until 7 or 8 most nights. But we made it work. Saturday mornings were sacred. We went to the farmer's market, had coffee on the couch. The crossword she finished and I contributed to in a way she described generously as moral support. Then sometime in the second year, I couldn't pin it to a date even if I tried. Things began to shift in the way that only becomes visible in hindsight. Small things. The kind you file away until you need it. Tess. She'd been Tess since the 3rd month we dated. Her version, her nickname, the one that fit the softer side of her she let close people see. Tess started spending more evenings out. Girls' nights that used to happen once a month became twice a week. Sleepovers at her friend Marlene's place. Girls' trips that got planned and executed with a speed and enthusiasm she'd never brought to our vacations. I told myself it was fine. She worked hard. She deserved to decompress with her friends. I worked long hours. Who was I to begrudge her a social life? But there was a coolness that settled in between us. Not a fight or accusations, just a cooling like a fire that wasn't being fed. She'd come home from these nights out distracted, pleasantly distracted, almost like she was somewhere else inside herself and finding it quite nice there. I asked her once gently if everything was okay. If we were okay. She smiled at me and kissed my cheek. "Of course. I'm just tired, Jude. You know how the firm gets." I believed her. I wanted to believe her. That's the thing no one tells you about loving someone. How much work your own hope does to protect you from what you don't yet want to see. One Friday night in November, we went for dinner at a restaurant called Garrison's. The building had exposed brick, low lighting, and was quite expensive. It was a group of us, me and Tess, Henry and his girlfriend Dana, our friends Marcus and Sophie, and Tess's best friend Marlene and her partner, Owen. We were on the 2nd bottle of wine. The appetizers had come and gone. The table was loose and warm, with the easy rhythm of people who knew each other well and liked each other on most days. Then Tess set down her glass. I noticed it only because she set it down very deliberately the way you set something down, when you're about to say something you've been holding for a long time, and you need both hands free for it. She looked at me. Only at me. And the table. I don't know how, but it felt it. The conversation dipped without any one person dropping it. Marcus stopped mid-sentence about something to do with a car. Sophie turned. "Jude," she said. Just my name. And already I knew. "I need some space." The table went very quiet. I looked at her, my wife, my Tess, sitting across from me in the restaurant we'd come to for our first anniversary. Wearing the earrings I'd given her for her birthday, looking at me with something in her eyes I'd never seen before. "Space," I said. "I ran into someone from college. His name is Darren. We were together for almost a year back then, and when I saw him, Jude, I realized I still have feelings for him. Old feelings. I don't know what they mean. I don't know if they are real or just, I don't know, but I can't pretend I don't feel them." The silence at that table was absolute. I could hear the restaurant around us, the clink of glasses 3 tables over, a woman laughing at the bar, the faint sound of jazz from somewhere above our heads, and all of it felt like it belonged to a different world. A world where this wasn't happening. She kept going. "I'm not sure what I want. I'm not sure if Darren is what I want, but I need to find out before I can come back to you and be fully present. I need to explore this. I need you to give me the space to do that." Henry's hand found my arm under the table. I felt it but didn't move. Marlene, her best friend, the woman who had held her bouquet at our wedding, reached across and squeezed Tess's hand. "You're so brave," she said softly. I heard Marcus exhale. I heard Sophie make a small sound. I heard Owen say nothing and look at the table. Henry said, "Tess, do you understand what you're saying right now, in front of everyone?" "I do. I know it's not the right way to do this, but I couldn't find another way to say it, and I didn't want to lie to him anymore. That word landed on me like a stone dropped from height. I looked at her for a long time, long enough that she started to look uncertain, like she'd rehearsed this, and the rehearsal hadn't accounted for my stillness. Then I said very quietly, "Okay, Tess, I hear you." I picked up my wine glass, finished what was in it, set it down, and I smiled, not at her, at the table. A smile that said, "We're still at dinner. This is still a civilized place. No one needs to panic." "Can we get the check?" I asked the waiter, who'd appeared at the edge of our disaster with the awful timing of the perfectly trained. We split the bill and said goodnight. Marlene hugged Tess. Henry walked me to my car. He didn't say anything until we'd reached it. Then he turned to me and said, "Tell me what you need." "Time to think," I said. He nodded, then pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than either of us would normally have allowed. He stepped back and held my eyes. "Whatever you decide, I'm here." I drove home. Tess didn't come back that night. I sat in our apartment for 2 hours after I got home, just thinking in the particular way the mind gets clear when the noise stops and what's left is the truth. Her friends had told her to go for it. My friends had told me to dump her immediately, and somewhere between those two camps was a man, me, who was being asked to wait at home like a spare key hanging on a hook, available if she decided she wanted back in. I thought about that. I thought about who I was. I thought about what the next 6 weeks or 6 months or however long space required would look like. Me waiting, her exploring, me hoping, her deciding. I thought about the look on Marlene's face. "You're so brave," and I thought about the look on Tess's face when she'd said it. Almost relieved, and I made a decision. I would not wait. I didn't decide not to wait, because I didn't love her. I did. Heaven help me, I still did. Sitting in that apartment with my coat still on, but I loved myself too. And I knew, the way you sometimes just know things in the stillness, that the man who waited wasn't the man I was willing to be. I started that night. By 2 a.m., I had drafted a message to my attorney, an old college friend named Esme, who specialized in family law and had always told me to call if I ever needed her, and meant it. I laid out what had happened and what I wanted to do. I asked for a consultation in the morning. By 3 a.m., I had researched the joint account. I withdrew exactly half. Every cent of my half moved to a new account in my name alone. Her half untouched, precisely divided, clean. By 4 a.m., I had called a storage facility, emailed a moving company for a quote, looked at apartments in a town 4 counties east of Denver, a small place called Hollowick that I'd passed through once on a drive to the mountains, and thought, this is a quiet place. By 5 a.m., I had made a list of everything I needed to do. It wasn't a list made in anger. It was a list made in the clear-eyed grief of someone who finally understood what was required of him. She had wanted space. I was going to give her all the space in the world. I packed my essentials that weekend. The things that were mine before we were ours. My books, my father's watch, a photograph of Henry and me at graduation, both of us grinning like idiots. I left her furniture, left the dishes, left the life we'd built together, arranged neatly in the room she'd chosen the color of. I sold my car and bought a different one, a used Jeep under a subsidiary name that Esme helped me establish. I changed my cell number, then contacted my employer and arranged a remote work transition, citing a family matter, which was, in the most expanded sense of the word, accurate. The name change took longer, but I'd been Jude Kellen all my life, and it was time to become Jude Lancaster. Lancaster for the dorm where I met Henry, where the version of me that loved Tess was first assembled. Call it sentiment, call it irony. I called it a foundation. Henry was the only one who knew. I sat across from him at a diner 2 days before I left and told him everything.
He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in the booth and looked at me for a long time. "You're really doing this," he said. "I'm really doing this. She's going to lose her mind. Probably. You know I can't tell anyone where you are. I know, and I know that's a lot to ask." He picked up his coffee mug. "You're my person, Jude. You've been my person since you walked into room 214 and looked at the bed I'd left you like it was good enough when clearly it was inferior." He said it like a joke, but his eyes weren't joking. "Go," he said. "Build something, and for Pete's sake, eat something besides diner food when you get there." I left on a Thursday morning. I drove east in the Jeep with the windows down, even though it was cold, because I needed to feel something real, and the wind was the most honest thing available. I didn't look back. I know what happened next, because Henry told me later, much later, when enough time had passed, that it was more story than wound. Tess returned to the apartment 2 weeks after the dinner at Garrison's. She'd apparently been staying with Marlene while she explored. What she came back to was silence. The furniture was still there. The dishes, the throw blankets she'd picked out from a market in Boulder the previous spring. Everything that was ours together remained, arranged in the rooms exactly as she'd left them. But the things that were mine were gone, and in their absence, she finally understood the difference. She called my number, which went straight to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. She called Henry. He didn't pick up. She called my mother, who told her truthfully that she hadn't heard from me, which was only possible because I'd visited my mother 3 weeks earlier, hugged her for a long time, explained in person what I was doing and why, and made her understand that her silence was the most loving thing she could give me. My mother, God bless her, kept that silence like a treasure. Tess called my work. She was told I was on an extended leave of absence. She called Esme without knowing Esme was my attorney. Esme didn't call back. 2 months after I left, the divorce papers arrived at the apartment, served properly through proper channels, by a process server who knocked on the door on a Wednesday afternoon while Tess was making coffee. She sat down on the kitchen floor, Henry told me. Just sat down right there, with the papers in her hands. She signed them 3 months later. She had no grounds to contest. The finances were clean. The division was documented. The marriage legally was dissolved. And I was gone. Completely gone. Jude Kellen didn't exist anywhere she could find him. But here is the part she never told anyone. Not Marlene, not her mother, not the friends who'd cheered her on at that dinner table. At least not for a while. She was pregnant. I arrived in Hollowick, Colorado. Population 12,000 when the ski season wasn't running, maybe 18 in winter. A main street with a coffee shop, a hardware store, a used bookstore that smelled like someone's grandmother's attic in the best possible way, and a restaurant called the Copper Rail that did the best short ribs I'd ever eaten and played Stevie Wonder on Friday nights. I rented a small house on the edge of town. 2 bedrooms, a porch that looked at the mountains, a landlord named Earl, who believed firmly in privacy and infrequent interaction. I paid 6 months up front. He shook my hand and never asked questions. I started slowly. Jude Lancaster, freelance brand consultant, available to businesses that needed real strategy and not the kind of polished nonsense that cost a fortune and moved no needles. I had 3 clients in my first month. I had 9 by the end of the first year. The work was different from what I'd done before, smaller in scale, but every client was a person I could sit across from and understand. I wasn't managing accounts, I was building things, actually building things, and something in me that had been clenched for a long time began to open. I made friends gradually, the kind of friends you make in a small town. My neighbor across the street, a retired civil engineer named Wallace, who taught me to make decent sourdough and debated baseball with a ferocity I hadn't seen since my college years. The woman at the bookstore, Cassandra, who put new arrivals aside for me when she thought I'd like them, which I almost always did. I didn't date, not for the first year, maybe not for the first 2. I was too busy becoming someone, and I didn't want to pull anyone into the construction while it was still underway. By year 3, Lancaster Consulting had 4 employees and a small office above the coffee shop on Main Street. We were working with clients in 4 states. I had bought a house. A proper house, not Earl's rental. A house with a garden and a gas fireplace and a porch I sat on every morning with coffee while the mountains went gold in the early light. I wasn't happy in the way I'd been happy with Tess in those first years. That happiness had a different texture, but I was at peace, and I'd come to understand that peace, properly maintained, is not the consolation prize it sometimes sounds like. It is its own quiet, sustaining thing. Henry visited twice a year. He never mentioned Tess unless I asked, and I rarely asked. What I knew from the fragments he offered, she'd lost the job at the litigation firm 18 months after I left. Darren, the old flame, the reason, had ended things with her quickly, it seemed, almost anticlimactically. She'd moved into a smaller apartment. She was getting by. And the child. Henry told me about the pregnancy on his second visit, sitting on my porch with beers we'd barely touched. He said it carefully. I don't know if it's yours, Jude. She doesn't know either. She says she thinks it might be. The timing. He trailed off. I sat with that for a long time. A child who might be mine, growing up in a life I'd walked away from. I won't pretend that didn't cost me something. It cost me a great deal. There were nights in that first house before the new one, before the business found its legs, when I lay awake and thought about it. A child, a maybe child. But I also thought about this. I had been willing. I had been present. I had been faithful. What I had not been was wanted, and a man cannot pour himself into a vessel that's already decided it's looking for a different shape. I prayed for that child, whoever they were. I prayed they were healthy and loved and growing well, and I set it down, the way you set down things you can't carry and have no right to keep. Life continued, and it was good. 4 years after I left Denver. 4 years after the dinner at Garrison's, after the voicemails, after the process server, after all of it. Hollowick did something every year in late summer that the whole region came out for, the Ridgeline Arts Festival. 3 days of food vendors and live music and local artists selling their work in white tents along the main street. The coffee shop put tables outside. The bookstore set up a cart. The copper rail extended their patio, and people ate short ribs in the sunshine and were, in general, decent to one another.
I loved it. I looked forward to it the way I'd looked forward to very few things in the past 4 years. I volunteered on the organizing committee, helped design the vendor layout, and on the Saturday of the festival, I was walking between tents with a cup of coffee and a breakfast burrito from the food truck that appeared every year from Santa Fe, in the middle of what I would later identify as one of the better mornings of my recent life. I was talking to Wallace, who had somehow at 71 become one of the festival's most popular food vendors, selling jars of the sourdough starter he'd cultivated for years under the brand name Honest Bread, which I had helped him design the label for, when something made me look up. I don't know why I looked up. Instinct maybe, or whatever that thing is that happens in your body when something from your past steps into your present. Some cellular memory that has nothing to do with thought. She was 30 feet away, standing at the edge of the first row of tents with another woman beside her. Marlene, I realized. Though she looked different, her hair shorter now. Tess was wearing a light sundress, her hair pinned up the way she used to wear it in summer. She was holding a paper cup and looking at a painting on a nearby easel. I turned away before she saw me, or thought I did. "Everything okay?" Wallace asked. "Fine," I said. "Be right back." I moved between the tents toward the far end of the festival, where the stage was being set up. My pulse was even. It wasn't racing, just a little louder than before, like someone had turned up the bass on a song that was already playing. I pulled out my phone and sent Henry a text. "You're not going to believe this." He called me in 40 seconds. I told him. There was a long pause. "Do you want to leave?" "It's my town, my festival. I helped design the vendor layout." Another pause. "Right. Do you want me to come?" "No, I'm okay." "Are you actually okay, or are you doing the thing where you say you're okay in a voice that means you're not, and then you deal with everything alone for 4 months?" I almost smiled. "I'm actually okay, because you sound calm." "I am calm. That's either very good or very concerning," he said. "Call me tonight." I slipped back into the festival and kept moving. I stopped at the bookstore cart, talked to Cassandra about a new arrival she'd been saving for me, bought a jar of Wallace's sourdough starter for a client who'd mentioned wanting to learn to bake. I behaved in every visible way, like a man who was simply enjoying his Saturday, and then I felt eyes on my back. a specific awareness of being watched, the particular quality of attention from someone who knows or knew you or has been looking for you for 4 years and is now standing 8 feet behind you and trying to decide whether what she's seeing is real. I turned around slowly. Tess was standing by a pottery stall holding her paper cup, not looking at the pottery, looking at me. Her face was completely still, the kind of stillness that comes after the first shock has passed through and left something quieter and more complicated in its wake. We looked at each other across the width of a Hollowick summer morning. I nodded once, politely. Then I turned and kept walking. Let me try to explain what happened next, because stalking is a strong word, and I don't use it lightly. What began at the pottery stall continued for the rest of that day and into the next. She followed me. Not the way it happens in films, but with a dogged, low-grade persistence that I recognized as her particular brand of determination. The same quality that had made her a good lawyer. The same quality that had probably made it hard to let go of an old feeling when it resurfaced. I saw her again near the food trucks at noon. She was with Marlene, but Marlene was talking to someone else, and Tess was watching me across the crowd with the focused attention of someone trying to decide how to cross a room. They're not sure they have the right to enter. I saw her again at the live music stage in the afternoon. She had positioned herself 20 feet away and was pretending to watch the band while watching me. I saw her at the coffee shop when I stopped in for a late afternoon espresso. She was at a table by the window. She hadn't, to my knowledge, looked up from her phone, but the moment I walked in, her posture changed, slightly imperceptibly to anyone who hadn't once known her well enough to notice. By Sunday morning, she had found out my name. Jude Lancaster, not Jude Kellen. I don't know who told her, someone on the festival committee, perhaps. Someone who knew me only as who I'd become and had no reason to treat that information as anything other than ordinary. She appeared at the door of my festival committee tent at 10 in the morning with a directness that I had to grudgingly admire. "Jude," she said. I was standing at the table reviewing the day's vendor map. I looked up. "Can I help you?" Her face did something complicated. "It's me," she said. Then, as if I might have forgotten, "It's Tess." "I know who you are," I said pleasantly, the way you're pleasant to someone you have no quarrel with and no intention of engaging. She stepped inside the tent. She looked, I noticed it now up close in the morning light, tired. She didn't look old or broken, but marked in the particular way that difficulty marks people, a softness replaced by something more careful. "I've been looking for you," she said. "I know. I didn't know how to find you. No one would tell me. Your mother, Henry, no one. I thought maybe I didn't know if you were okay." "I'm very okay," I said, "as you can see." She looked around the tent at the map, the clipboard, the coffee cup from the shop with the owner's handwriting on the side, the small, contained, fully functional life implied by all of it. "You built something," she said. "I did." There was a long silence. Outside, the festival was beginning to stir. I could hear the food trucks setting up, the band doing a sound check, Wallace's voice carrying across the square as he explained something about fermentation to a small audience of genuinely interested strangers. "We need to talk," she said. "About what, Tess?" She looked at me. Her eyes were the same. That was the worst part, maybe, that her eyes were exactly the same. "About everything. About what I did. There are things you don't know." "I know about the baby," I said quietly. The blood left her face. Henry told you." "Henry told me 4 years ago." She sat down in the camp chair nearest to her. I hadn't offered it, but her legs apparently required it. "I didn't know if it was yours," she said. Her voice for the first time had lost its composure. "I genuinely didn't know, and by the time I found out, you were gone. You were completely gone." I set down the clipboard and looked at her carefully. "Is it mine?" She looked up at me, and in her eyes I saw the things she'd come here to say. Maybe the things she'd been carrying for 4 years. "Yes." The word landed in the tent and stayed there. Yes. 1 syllable. 4 years of weight in it. I didn't sit down. I stayed standing very still. The way I'd learned to be still in the past 4 years, when the world required me to process something large and complicated. "Her name is Mia," Tess said. Her voice was steadier now, the composed woman returning to the surface even as something else, raw and exhausted, moved beneath it. "She's 3.5. She has your eyes. She has your laugh, the way it comes out before you mean it to. Her voice broke once and she controlled it. "She asks about her dad." I breathed in through my nose and out through my mouth. "What do you tell her?" I asked. "That he's someone who loved her before she was born. That sometimes things between adults get complicated in ways that aren't about the children. That she is wanted and she is good." I closed my eyes for a moment. "Why are you here, Tess?" I asked. "Not in Hollowick. Here, in this tent. Why after 4 years?" She took a breath. She wasn't going to cry. I could see her making that decision, that old lawyerly discipline gathering itself. Because I owe you the truth. I owed it to you that night at Garrison's, and I didn't give it to you. I didn't give you the dignity of a private conversation. I humiliated you in front of your friends because I don't know what I thought, that you'd be so stunned you wouldn't leave, that everyone watching would make it easier somehow. I don't know. I was stupid and I was selfish, and I have had 4 years to understand exactly how stupid and how selfish. And Darren? I asked. Her laugh was short and without humor. Darren lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks after I chose him over my husband, he told me he was actually seeing someone else and hadn't meant for things between us to get complicated. I nodded. I'm not here to ask you to come back, she said. I know you've built a life here. I can see it. I'm here because Mia deserves to know who her father is. Because you deserve to know you have a daughter, and because I couldn't carry the weight of you not knowing for another year without it breaking me in half. There it was. The truth finally offered quietly in a tent at a summer festival by a woman who had done a terrible thing and had spent 4 years learning its dimensions. I walked to the entrance of the tent and looked out at the festival, at the people and the music and this easy, ordinary beauty of a town I had built a life in. At Wallace, handing a jar of sourdough starter to a family with 2 small children who were very interested in the jar. At Cassandra, adjusting a book display with the focused attention she brought to everything. At the life I'd made. I thought about Mia, 3.5 years old. My eyes, Tess said. My laugh. I turned back to face her. I want to meet her, I said. Tess exhaled the longest exhale, like she'd been holding it since November 4 years ago. Okay, she said. Not because of you and me. There is no you and me, Tess. I want to be clear about that. I know. But if she's mine, if she's actually mine, then she deserves a father who shows up, whatever that looks like, from 4 counties away, with a divorce decree and complicated history. She deserves someone who shows up. Tess nodded. Her eyes were wet finally, though she didn't let it become crying. I can arrange a DNA test, she said, if you want confirmation. I understand if you need that. I do, I said. Not because I don't believe you, but because when I walk into that little girl's life, I want to do it on ground that's solid. No doubts, no what-ifs, solid ground. That's fair, she said. We stood there for another moment. The festival moved around us. How are you? I asked, not with the warmth of what we used to be, but with the basic human decency that I had refused to abandon even in the worst of this. She almost smiled. Getting better, she said. Slowly, but getting better. Good, I said, and I meant it. The DNA test confirmed it 6 weeks later. Mia Elaine, Tess had given her Tess's surname, which would need to change eventually in its own time, and at Mia's pace, was my daughter. I drove to Denver on a Sunday in October, the same month more or less, that Tess and I had first talked at a frat party a decade ago, the same city I'd left with the windows down on a cold Thursday morning 4 years prior. I pulled up to a small apartment in a quiet part of Lakewood. Tess was on the porch steps and beside her, standing very straight and very serious in the way that 3.5-year-olds stand when they're trying to be grown up and can't quite contain how much they actually are, was a small girl in a red coat. She had dark eyes. She had my laugh. Even just standing there in the potential of before we'd spoken, I could see it in the way her face was arranged, the same way my face arranges itself when something surprises it into joy. I got out of the Jeep and walked up the path. Mia watched me come. She didn't run or hide. She tilted her head slightly and assessed me with the frank evaluation that small children have not yet learned to disguise. Hi, she said. Are you my dad? I crouched down so we were eye level. I am, I said. She considered this. Do you like dinosaurs? She asked. I love dinosaurs. She nodded slowly, satisfied. Okay, I have a book. She held up a very battered copy of a field guide to prehistoric life. Let's look at it, I said. She sat down on the porch step and opened it, and I sat beside her. Tess stood 2 steps up and watched, her arms crossed, her face doing something I couldn't quite read and didn't try to. It wasn't forgiveness or reunion. It wasn't a second chance at anything, except this. A small girl in a red coat who wanted to show her father pictures of Triceratops and Brachiosaurus, and had no idea yet of the weight and the distance and the cost that had preceded this ordinary Sunday morning. It was enough. It was actually everything. Henry texted me that evening. How'd it go? I typed back. She has a dinosaur book. She gave me a full 30-minute lecture on the Cretaceous period. He replied with 3 words. Room 214, brother. I drove back to Hollowick in the dark. The mountains were shadows at the edge of the headlights. The road was mine and mine alone and ahead of it. In a house with a gas fireplace and a morning porch and a small girl's dinosaur book photo on my phone, and a future being built one careful, honest, unrushed day at a time, was everything I needed. I had not won. I had simply chosen, when the moment arrived, to be the kind of man who walks toward his life instead of waiting in the ruins of someone else's choice. And that, I think, was the best decision I ever made. If this story stayed with you, hold it for a moment before you scroll. Jude didn't fight or beg. He didn't wait with the lights on, hoping she'd change her mind. He grieved quietly and privately, and then he did the hardest and most honest thing a person can do. He chose himself. There's a version of this story where he waits, where he lets her exploration determine his worth, where he measures himself by whether she comes back. That man exists and no one should judge him. Love makes fools and heroes out of all of us. But Jude chose to refuse the role of spare key, and in doing so, he didn't just save himself from more heartbreak. He built a life so solid and so genuinely his that when the past came walking into his festival 4 years later, it found a man who didn't flinch. The child was the part no one saw coming, and even Mia, Jude approached with the same principled clarity, as a responsibility and as a joy. If you take anything from this story, it will be this: your dignity isn't negotiable. You can love someone with everything you have and still refuse to be diminished by them. Those two things can be true at the same time. The space you give someone who has hurt you doesn't have to be filled with waiting. You can use that space to build. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't a confrontation. It's a life so whole and so grounded that when the past finds you, it finds someone who no longer needs to be affected by it. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done at that dinner table? Would you have waited or walked? And if this story moved you, if it made you think, don't leave quietly. Hit that subscribe button and become part of the Story Junkie family. Every week, we're in here telling stories that make you feel something real. Stories with stakes, stories with heart, stories that send you to bed thinking, you belong here, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Take care, and God bless you.